Hi everyone, and welcome to this Fantasy Art Friday video. In this video I'm going to be working on a drawing of a centaur, and I'm having so much fun working on these fantasy art videos because they give me the opportunity to try drawing some characters that I never would have before, and also it's kind of pushing me out of my comfort zone in terms of drawing, which is a great way to learn by challenging yourself. In terms of this drawing, the real challenging part was the anatomy, getting the human proportions and the horse proportions as well. They proved to be a real challenge for this drawing, just even in terms of the initial sketch. It took a lot of time just trying to get those first guidelines down. And it's kind of made me realise that this year I would really love to start studying a bit more of anatomy in my free time. I think learning the fundamentals, learning more of the fundamentals would really help me in the future with like character creation. That's something that I would really love to do, and that's going to be one of my goals for this year. In terms of this character, I was kind of thinking about the centaurs that you see in Harry Potter or Narnia, with the classic features of the horns and the beard. But then I could try to change it up a little bit by making this character a warrior. So he has some armour on his shoulders and he has some gauntlets. He's also got chainmail running along his arms and along his shoulders. And then also giving him a very large spear, crafted with a stick and some sharp pieces of metal with just held together by cloth. Also giving him like a hand guard on the spear that protects his hand while he's using it. Once the pencil sketch was completed, it was then time to work on the pen outlines, and for those outlines I used a mixture of a Pigma Micron 05 and a Copic Multiliner SP 0.03mm. I used the Pigma Micron to add the thicker lines, trying to add thicker lines to where the shading was going to be placed later on, and then for the finer lines with the Copic Multiliner I was using that for his face and for his hair, and some of the finer details like the chainmail. After the outlines, it was time for the colouring, and for the colouring of this drawing I used Copic Markers, starting off by working on the skin tones of his face. For that I added a base layer of colour with pinkish white, and then added shading to the skin with a pale grape and light grape, also using a cool grey number 5 to add some shading along the left side. To add some warmer tones to his nose and lips I used a blush marker, and for his eyes I used a spectrum green. To add the highlights to his eyes, nose and lips as well, as I always like to do in these drawings, I used my Uni-Ball Signo Broad white ink pen. I also thought, as he's a warrior, maybe it would be a good idea to add some war paint, so I added some paint like going across his eyes using a crimson marker. After colouring his face, for the colouring of his hair I used a cool grey number 7, adding highlights to it with my white Prismacolor pencil and the Uni-Ball highlighter. And also for the colouring of his horns I used a warm grey number 3. I used the same skin tones for the colour of his body and added highlight with the white Prismacolor pencil and the highlighter pen. And then for the colour of the chainmail on his arms and shoulders I used a base layer of cool grey number 3, adding shading with cool grey 5 and 7, and then added dots of highlights with the highlighter pen again to kind of show up that metallic reflective surface, just on the left side of each section of the chainmail. I used a light walnut marker for the leather strap across his chest, and then for all of the armour plating, so the shoulder guard, elbow guard, the gauntlets and the gloves, I was using the same colouring process. So for the silver coloured areas I was using the cool grey 3, 5 and 7, and then for the golden colouring I was using brick beige and sand, using the highlighter pen to add all of the highlights necessary to make it look like reflective surfaces. For the colouring of the horse section of the centaur's body, I started off by using a dark bark marker to add the darkest colouring, and then blending over the top of that to add the highlighted sections I used a maroon marker, kind of trying to create that effect. You know when you see a really shiny coat on a horse? That's what I was aiming for. And adding the dark bark marker first and then blending the maroon marker over the top of it was a great way to also show up the wrinkles in the skin and the muscle fibres on the legs. I used the cool grey 5 and 7 markers to add the colouring to the centaur's feet, and then for its tail I used the same dark bark and maroon markers as before, but then blended a sand marker over the top of it to add more of a golden colour. After that, to help define some of the shapes, like the wrinkles on the skin and the muscles on the centaur's legs, I used a white Prismacolor pencil and the Uni-Ball highlighter pen. I felt like it was necessary to add some highlights around these areas, especially with the dark colouring of the skin, otherwise it was quite hard to distinguish some of the shapes. For the colouring of his spear, I used a maroon marker for the stick, and then for the metal sections of the spear I was using cool grey 3 and 5, trying to add more of a scratched texture to those areas by using the white Prismacolor pencil and adding some extra shading with the cool grey 5. Just trying to make the spear look a bit more worn down and I guess battle worn. And then for the colouring of the cloth that's wrapped around the spear, I was using warm grey 3 and 5. For the final stage of this drawing, it was time for the background, and I started off by adding the sky at the top of the image with an ice blue marker, making sure to leave an area for the clouds. I decided to add 2 layers of clouds and just kind of changing the gradient between a pale grape and pale heath, adding the pale grape first and then blending upwards into the pale heath, and just adding 2 layers of clouds in that way. In front of those clouds I added some mountains, and to create those mountains I added the dark shading first with the light grape marker, and then kind of just left the front face of the mountains nice and highlighted, adding some warmer tones with the pale heath marker as well. I decided to also add some rolling green hills in front of the mountains, and for this I started off with a pale green for the really faded green in the background. In front of that, to add the next layers of hills, I used a lime green marker. And then for the grass that the Centaur is standing on, I used a mixture of ocean green and Nile green, also adding some shading over the top of that with cool grey 5 and 7. For the final touches of this drawing, I used my Uni-Ball highlighter pen to add a highlight going all the way around the Centaur, also adding a faded outline going around the spear as well, just to kind of separate it from the background. I also added some highlights to the mountains and some highlights around the grass just to separate the layers. And then I added some particle effects around the Centaur to add that kind of magical feel to this drawing. Also adding some birds flying in the background as well with my pencil and the highlighter pen. After that, this drawing was completed. I genuinely had a huge amount of fun working on this one as well. I love working on the fantasy art videos because it's just kind of a way of trying some different things, and this was definitely a big challenge in terms of anatomy. I don't think I've ever really tried drawing many horses before, so that was also a big challenge for this drawing. I really hope you enjoyed watching, and let me know what you think of this drawing in the comments below. And if you have any suggestions for future fan art or fantasy art, then please let me know as well. Your suggestions really help me out, and it genuinely really helps to support the channel. If you want to watch more videos like this, then make sure to subscribe, and any likes or shares are hugely appreciated, and it really means a lot to me. If you want to follow my progress and keep up to date with everything I'm working on, then be sure to check out the links in the description box below to check out my Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. And once again, thank you so much for supporting this channel, and thank you so much for watching this video. It really means a lot. I hope you're having an amazing day, and I'll see you all soon.